I just need a second to turn my hearing aids down. Otherwise, I won't talk loud enough. It's life, you know? We'll see. Here it comes. No, the software doesn't want to connect. So if I'm not talking loud enough, tell me and I'll speak up. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see all of you on this gorgeous Sunday morning, soon to be afternoon. It's a special day in a lot of ways. Most importantly, because you're here and we get to share the Dharma, and I mean that literally, that we're sharing it. Even though I'm sitting up here, I'm right in it with you. And at least that's where I want to come at this from. The last time, about a month ago, when I was giving a talk, I gave a talk on devotion because we in the West get a little confused about what that means. And so it seemed to me that it would be a good thing to talk about. Then Lama Tobden, Lopan Lama Tobden came and taught on the Mahamudra lineage prayer, which if there was ever a true line for what happens in this center and for this lineage, all in one page, that would be it. And sure enough, what comes up is one of the highlights in that prayer is devotion. So then, he emphasized that. So, I felt, all right, that was like a week ahead of you. Anyway, he also, one of the lines of the prayer is, detachment is the foot of meditation, as it is taught. To this meditator who is not attached to food and wealth, who cuts ties to this life, grant your blessings, so that I have no desire for honor and gain. And then Khenpo Sanjay, who was translating for him, insisted, not once, not twice, but at least about 3 times, a better translation for that word, that Tibetan word, whatever it is, I don't know what it is in Tibetan. Better translation for detachment is revulsion, which is a pretty darn strong word. Detachment is kind of cool. It's clean. It's easy. Yeah, okay, I can let go, That's what it's about. Let it go. Let it be. Beatles, But revulsion, this is like a little more kind of a heavy metal translation of that let it be thing. So I thought to myself, wow, what is it should we be revolted by? Okay? What is it? I always end up asking these questions. I think it's because I was raised Jewish, and rather than being raised with always believing everything, you were raised to ask a lot of questions. That was just where it's at, and I want to reach out for all who celebrate it and wish everybody a Happy New Year. Today is the beginning of the High Holy Days in Judaism. It's Rosh Hashanah. Also notable is it's Kalu Rinpoche's birthday, who's a great teacher, if you ever happen to run across him. Really, really cool and really brilliant teacher. Also, it's my Jewish birthday. I was born on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. So there you go. It's like a very auspicious day. Anyway, out of that background, I was wondering to myself, yeah, well, okay, revulsion. That's a pretty, it's kind of like heavy metal Dharma. And what is it I'm supposed to be revolted by? And that's what I was contemplating, getting ready for this talk. That's what I want to build this talk around. So I'll start it out with just a touching back on devotion, because that's part of the picture. And then the third part of that part of the lineage prayer is meditation is the body. And so we've got detachment or revulsion is the foot, devotion is the head, meditation is the body. And my hope is, I'm going to give another Dharma talk about a month from now, if God willing and the creek don't rise, And I hope to do a little bit on meditation to kind of close the circle. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to read a little story to you out of Lion's Roar magazine about Nagarjuna that kind of ties this idea of detachment and how it segues into meditation. It's a nice story. So that'll be toward the end of this talk. Also, on the way out the door, I'll try to remember to remind you, I printed out, I don't think enough, but I printed out 20 copies of a handout that are sitting back there on that little desk to the left of the door. So please help yourself, and I'll let you know what it is. So if you need to look at it online, if you want one and don't get one, you'll know what to look for. So, as always though, importantly, we start all these Dharma talks with the refuge prayer. It doesn't hurt to do this prayer again and again and again all day long. It's really important to understand that what we usually take refuge in, all the things we chase after in life, are not stable or authentic refuges. Obviously, so much falls apart, right? But the Buddha, the enlightened mind, which is both the historical teacher and our current teachers, and also the light that's already within you, the Dharma, what the Buddha teaches, and the Sangha, which is this community of people that are supporting each other on this path. They're stable and authentic refuges we can depend on. We forget, though, because life tends to pull us in a different direction. So we start with this refuge prayer, just to remind ourselves and to set our motivation. The last two lines is a reminder to ourselves of being motivated to have a good heart. Motivated that's what our goal is, to open up a good heart and to hold that heart for all beings. And that's really the reason we're here this morning. That's really the reason. So if you join with me, and we'll chant it in Tibetan 3 times. You have it on those sheets there. It'll be a good way to start. Sunje chudong suki chognam la, jang chu pardu dakni kyap suchi, daki jin so gipe sunam ki, rola pinchir sanje ruparsho. Sanje judong soki choknam la. Jangchu pardu dakni kyapsuchi. Daki jinso gipe sonam ki. Drola pinchir sanje ruparsho. Sanje chudang soki choknam la. Changchu pardu dakni kyapsuchi. Daki jinso yipe sunam ki. Drola pinchir sanje ruparsho. So after the prayer says detachment or revulsion, as it were, is the foot of meditation, it's really, really fascinating to me to think I could sit in the state of revulsion and that would be the foot of meditation. Usually I'm pretty upset when I'm revolted by something. It's kind of crazy, right? It's interesting to contemplate. We'll get to it. And then it goes on and it says, devotion is the head of meditation, as is taught. The guru opens the door to the treasure house of oral instructions. And it goes a little more, and then we come to the third part. Awareness is the body of meditation, as is taught. And this says a few things about that. So, what the last talk was about was that devotion isn't the head in the sense of it as a destination, you know, like a trailhead or something like that. It's your mind. It's your head. It's involved with everything, the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's always there. Devotion starts with our interest and our curiosity. And that's a form of devotion. Make no mistake. It really isn't like a love, devotion, and surrender or a Motown song. I second that emotion. You know, it's not that. So even your curiosity and your interest and your questions, being committed to that, being committed and devoted to your own inquisitiveness is legit, like what they consider the first stage of devotion. The Buddha, the historical Buddha, invited everybody to question everything that he taught, assuming that they were already ethical. You know, for the people who weren't quite ethical yet, he went with ethics first. But if you had that, if you realized the importance of that, the next thing was, I'm going to say some things, but it's your job to ask questions. Maybe Buddha was Jewish, I don't know. And the prayer says about devotion that the Lama, or the guru, opens the door. But here's what we need to realize. Opens the door to what? Well, the treasure house of oral teachings. Well, okay. All right. We're going to the treasure house. The thing is, our curiosity has gotten us to the front gate. And it's a vast, vast estate with a long path from the front gate to the front door. So even though the Lama, the guru, is opening the door, we can't even see the door from the front gate. We have to walk a ways. All right? Guru will always be there, no doubt about it. And when you get there, we'll open the door. But our thing right now is recognizing that we're just going through the front gate and we have to figure out how to walk this path, which is one of the reasons that it's important that it says detachment, revulsion is the foot of meditation, because we got to walk a ways. We need these feet, all right? So, as most of you probably have already experienced, as we walk this Dharma path, interesting things begin to happen. Not necessarily in our outer life, although sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, whatever. But certainly in our inner life, we start to experience what I would call the goodness of the Dharma. We find ourselves in situations, once we've started walking this path, that we know normally we would react to, say, suboptimally. And all of a sudden there's some new creativity and openness, and we're like more able to work with it with a good heart rather than this like closed down reactive tension. But, and it's authentic, that's for real, but it's not stable. That's the thing. And so why is that goodness there right from the beginning? Well, for two reasons. One is Dharma practice is very effective. I mean, it is really brilliant the way these sadhanas and practices are constructed. It just walks your mind through one direct experience after another that your mind needs to have in order to open up to what is already inside of you. That's usually obscured. That's what practice does, okay? But life intervenes. We all have a lot to do. We all have a lot of responsibilities. We're all pretty busy, and we're not quite used to keeping all those little gates that sadhana practice and meditation practice open. We're not quite used to keeping all that open all the time. And they close down and we go back to reacting to stuff the way we react to stuff. That's sort of the path. Our usual stuff, our triggers, and we all have them, our habitual responses, our habits, our karmas, our propensities, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, they come rushing right back in. Rushing right back in. And they demand our attention. So we begin to feel the goodness of the Dharma, but our self-concern just asserts itself again and again. In the classical literature, that's the things that come up are called the 8 worldly concerns, or the 8 worldly dharmas. That's what the handout is back there, is the 8 worldly dharmas. I encourage anybody who's interested in what I have to say, to find that and to look at that. You can look it up online. There's a lot of resources for it. That particular little flow chart is, I think, a useful diagram. So if you don't get one, just get a look at one or take a picture of it with your phone. And you can search it out. It's online. So Alan Wallace, who's a great Dharma teacher, if you're looking, if you look around, if your curiosity is high on the Dharma, and you know there's some really good stuff Dr. Google will put in your search engine, and also some really stuff that's not helpful. I won't say more about it than that. We have to figure out who's reliable and who's not. Alan Wallace, when he comes up, he's reliable. He talks about the 8 worldly concerns this way. He says, they are gain and loss, so hope for gain, fear of loss, hope for pleasure and fear of pain, hope for praise and fear of blame, hope for fame and fear of disgrace. Those are the 8 worldly concerns. How much of our time is spent out there just trying to get a pat on the head? Even sometimes doing Dharma practice. You want Lama Kathy to come by and say, oh, you're practicing so well. That's not the Buddha Dharma. That's one of these 8 worldly concerns. So Alan says this, these are the concerns that pervade most people's lives. They are pervasive precisely because they are mistaken for an effective means to happiness and to avoid suffering. And of course, that's what we're all motivated by, right? Is we want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. Every single one of us, when it comes right down to us, whether, it's you and me or somebody we love or somebody we hate or somebody we don't care about at all, every living thing is motivated that way. We just want to be happy. We just want to avoid suffering. Okay. And then we think that if we really, delve back into these things, like if I can gain and avoid loss, or if I can have pleasure and avoid pain, and if I can have praise and avoid blame, and have fame, avoid disgrace, we'll be happy. Well, look around you. Tune into the news. How's that working for people? But we're hardwired to believe it does work. What the Dharma's doing is kind of untying those knots, teasing that web of lies apart for us. And the way it does it is through these practices, which give us our own direct experience. Understanding this is of some use, but not, your understanding will never bring you stability, but your direct experience will bring you stability. So the first thing is practice, like a lot, every day. Pick a time, pick an amount you can do, and do it. You'll thank me later. So Alan goes on. For example, many of us, driven by the concerns of gain and loss, work to acquire income so that we can buy the things that money can buy. Some of them necessities, but often many of them unnecessary things that we believe will bring us happiness. We also earn money so that we can avoid the misery and humiliation of poverty. Again, experiencing pleasure and avoiding pain are the primary motivations for a majority of our activities. We engage in many actions, some of which may seem spiritual for the sake of immediate satisfaction or relief. For example, if we have a headache, we may take an aspirin or sit and meditate, hoping the headache will go away. These remedies may lead to temporary relief from discomfort, but that's where their effectiveness ends. Praise and blame is the next pair of worldly concerns, and even a little reflection reveals the great extent to which our behavior is influenced by the desire for praise and the fear of blame. The final pair, fame and disgrace, includes seeking others' approval, affection, acknowledgement, respect, and appreciation, and avoiding the corresponding disapproval, rejection, and so on. The reason for drawing attention to these 8 worldly concerns is not to show they are inherently bad. That's really important. They're not bad. It's not bad to buy a car, enjoy a fine meal. You can see I do that. To be praised for one's work or respected by others. Rather, the reason for pointing them out is to reveal their essentially transient nature and their impotence as a means to lasting happiness. In other words, they are not your stable refuge. They're not bad. It's not bad to eat well, have a good car, and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people get that stuff wrong. They think, oh my goodness, the 8 worldly concerns, or oh my goodness, the desires of the flesh. I better go buy the best hair shirt I can afford. Let me flagellate myself every morning, It won't work. That won't work either. It won't work. What works? Well, when we're motivated to see the truth, the first truth being that we possess, and this is what we need to have faith in, because if we saw it already, we'd be enlightened. What we need to believe is that we already possess that which we seek, our own Buddha nature. We already have it, and that all beings possess that too. It's just covered over, just obscured. And if we're motivated to uncover that for the benefit of all beings, because obviously when Buddha walks around, it benefits them just by being around that goodness. How do we know that? Well, with some people, you can feel it. It's kind of palpable. Some of you might have felt there was a special energy here when Lopan Lama Topten was here. Even though you didn't understand his language, you could feel it. Used to be when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was with us and he would visit, he'd be sitting here talking in Tibetan. Somebody would walk in the back of the shrine room and see him and just burst into tears. There's a great story about him. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. There was a guy, a friend told me this story. This guy was her friend, and he was going through a particularly tough time. He was suffering a lot and felt like, what's the point in life? He was in totally nihilistic frame of mind, and my friend didn't know how to help him. And Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was giving a weekend teaching up at KTD, and so they decided to drive up from the city, and he said, you may not understand what's going on here, but just marinate in the energy of the place and see what happens. You might feel better. And so he sat there kind of like in the middle and a little to the left, kind of in the throng of people. The way KTD is, they're like rows of lamas on either side of the middle aisle, and then rows of lamas behind them, all sitting facing each other, and then people sitting kind of in the back half in rows, kind of the way we have them. And he sat, back in here. And Rinpoche gave his talk. I don't know what it was. And while he was talking, this guy was just praying something like, I don't want to end my life, but it feels like, why not? I don't want to feel this much suffering. I just want it to end, and so on and so on and so on. But throughout the talk, the report is, he started to feel a little better. At the end of the talk, the way KTD is set up, Rinpoche would be sitting like up here, and there was a door back here that he would go through, and that's where his place was. So he'd get up and he'd walk out. When he got up, everybody get up, and everybody bow a little bit. But this time, he got up, and he decided to go up the middle aisle like this. And everybody's chanting Karmapacheno or whatever he told them to chant while they were all leaving. And he stopped 2/3 of the way back and made his way back to where this guy was sitting. And he just gave him a hug. And he held his head in his hands, and he whispered in English. Rinpoche almost never spoke any English. Whispered in English in his ear, "It'll be okay." That was it. And then he walked back out. It turned out that guy got a real, I guess, he got zapped by that somehow. Something changed. And he became a Dharma student and a student of Rinpoche's, and his life totally transformed. Well, the reason I'm telling that story, that is who we want to be, right? I have the potential to be that in my own way, with my own unique kind of personality, and so do you. But we have to walk this path or something to get there, because right now, while it's in there, it gets a little muddled with all the 8 worldly dharmas that we get tangled up in. So, the Dharma doesn't change the fact that there's going to be pain in life. What it says is that pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. The reason we suffer is that we get our motivation kind of turned around, and then we tell ourselves stories about it. So if we suffer a loss, let's say, and we've told ourselves the story, if I lose this or if I don't have that, my life is just over. You know, there are all kinds of examples of that, right? Well, those are the things that we need to catch. Those are the little details. And as we walk the path, if we do meditation, this noticing of thoughts and letting go of them, rather than being entertained by the story around them and amplifying them even, and creating some, daytime soap opera about what's going on. Rather than that, we drop them. Not because they're bad, it's just because they're waves in the ocean of our being, and we want to let them be waves. And as you know, waves come up and waves go down. And they're made out of that same ocean stuff that's also the ocean of loveliness and peace. Same stuff. And somehow this wave looks this way, and we call that pain and suffering, and that wave looks that way, and we call it pleasure. But through meditation, we begin to just drop the labels. We begin to just say, there's anger there. And we let it go, and it just kind of, it's no problem that it was there. Any more than, when a bird flies through the air. You ever notice they like poop when they're flying? It doesn't hurt the air. That's sort of like when we get angry, it's like that. It doesn't hurt the vast space of our being, so we don't have to militate against our own anger and get involved in that. We look at it. and we watch it dissolve, and we come to rest again in the nature of our own mind. That's what meditation's training us to do, all right? So it's not like we become somehow less human at all. We're becoming more human and more open to the experience of this life. It's very important. The difference is that we feel everything. We might even feel it more acutely. And I think that does happen for some of the great saints. It seems to happen. They seem to feel more deeply than I do. But they also feel freedom from the shackles of it. They're not imprisoned by that. They're feeling freedom from their habitual reactivity to that experience. They're feeling less pressed and a little more spacious. Even some peace in pain. Sometimes even some amusement, because we are kind of silly, you know. We also can feel our wishes to be a little kinder and grow in compassion. And we can begin to have a little more faith in our Dharma path. That faith is also devotion. This faith and devotion grows. And we begin to see we're not only defined by these 8 worldly dharmas and all the stories swirling around them. We're not defined by all these things that we've insisted our whole lives that make me me. I mean, I like this and I don't like that. We realize that those narratives have kept us in prison, and chasing them down, this is an important image, to me at least, is just like a fish chasing bait, only to wind up on the hook. And we do this again and again and again, and we use up this precious human birth in the process. And that is what we need to be revolted by. That is what we have revulsion for, is this sick, codependent relationship that we have with the story we tell ourselves about what we think will make us happy, rather than directly experiencing this enlightened nature that's already within us, which is actually non-dual, undividable happiness itself. When you feel it, and we get glimpses of it all the time. You all have felt it. Maybe on the meditation cushion, maybe not. Maybe at a beautiful sunrise or sunset, or just an awesomely wonderful meal. You feel this total satisfaction. So the only issue about that isn't whether we can feel that or not. We can feel that. We get it. It's this stability thing. Because once we start to look, what we see is our own craziness, right? Like, how many times, I don't know about you, but me, how many times can you turn a compliment into an argument? I've done that. How many times can you be so starving because you haven't eaten enough, you're hangry, as the commercial says, and yet you have no idea what you want to eat. And you just sit there because you don't know what'll please you, what your preferences are. I'd like some peanut butter. No, the peanut butter, whatever. And we're just sitting there. We're crazy. And so once we recognize that, we can A, laugh a little bit, and B, we can start to allow some creative space to do some less crazy, more appropriate responses to the way things are rather than our just general neurotic reactivity. That's what we need to have revulsion for, is our attachment to the idea that somehow the 8 worldly dharmas are going to bring us happiness. They're not. And yet we're hardwired to believe that. So there is no question that we need mindful awareness to live our life if we're aware of this stuff. There's just no other way. How else would you do it? How else? So, I want to give you this little story of Nagarjuna, which encapsulates this whole thing. I found this story in Lion's Roar, which is a nice Buddhist publication. So, Nagarjuna was just kind of like, you know, in India they've got what they call fakers or fakirs who do things, magic tricks and, you know, snake charming and just kind of sit by the side of the road. And he just was naked, sitting on the side of the road doing his fakir thing. But he was loved by everybody. He was one of these guys who had that kind of Kempo Kartha Rinpoche thing going on where you could just feel him, you know? And so there was this queen of his kingdom that was deeply in love with him. And she asked him one day to come to the palace, to be a guest in the palace. And Nagarjuna went, and the queen asked him a favor. And Nagarjuna said, "What do you want?" And the queen said, "I want your begging bowl." And Nagarjuna gave it. That was literally the only thing he had, his begging bowl. And the queen brought a golden begging bowl studded with diamonds and gave it to Nagarjuna, and she said, "Now you keep this. I will worship the begging bowl that you have carried for years. It has some of your vibe. It will become my temple. And a man like you should not carry an ordinary wooden bowl. Keep this golden one. I've had it made especially for you. It was really precious." If Nagarjuna had been an ordinary mystic, he would have said, "I can't touch it. I mean, I got to wear my hair shirt, right?" Sidebar. I have renounced the world, you know? But for him, it was all the same. So he took the bowl. When he left the palace, a thief saw him. He could not believe his eyes. A naked man with such a precious thing, how long can he protect it? So the thief followed. Nagarjuna was staying outside the town in a ruined ancient temple. No doors, no windows, it was just a ruin. The thief was very happy. Soon Nagarjuna will have to go to sleep, and there will be no difficulty. I will get the bowl. The thief was hiding behind a wall just outside the door. Nagarjuna threw the bowl outside the door. The thief could not believe what had just happened. Nagarjuna threw it because he had watched the thief coming behind him, and he knew perfectly well that he was not coming for him, he was coming for the bowl. So why unnecessarily let him wait? Be finished with it so he can go and I can rest. Such a precious thing, and Nagarjuna has thrown it so easily. The thief could not go without thanking him. He knew perfectly well that it had been thrown for him, and he peeked in and he said, "Sir, accept my thanks. But you are a rare being. I cannot believe my eyes." and a great desire has arisen in me. I'm wasting my life being a thief, and there are people like you too. Can I come in and touch your feet?" Nagarjuna laughed and he said, "Yes, that's why I threw the bowl outside, so that you could come inside." The thief was trapped. The thief came in, touched the feet, and at that moment the thief was very open because he had seen this man was not an ordinary man. He was very vulnerable, open, receptive, grateful, mystified, stunned. When he touched the feet for the first time in his life, he felt the presence of the divine, and he asked Nagarjuna, "How many lives will it take for me to become like you?" Nagarjuna said, "How many lives? It can happen today. It can happen now." The thief said, "You must be kidding. How can it happen now? I'm a thief, a well-known thief. The whole town knows me, although they have not been able to catch hold of me. Even the king is afraid of me because 3 times I've entered and stolen from the treasury. They know it, but they have no proof. I am a master thief. You may not know me because you are a stranger in these parts. How can I be transformed right now?" And Nagarjuna said, "If in an old house for centuries there's been darkness, and you bring a candle, can the darkness stay? Can the darkness say, for centuries and centuries, I have been here? I cannot go out just because you have brought a candle in. I've lived so long. Can the darkness give resistance? Will it make any difference whether the darkness is 1 day old or millions of years old?" The thief could see the point. Darkness cannot resist light. When light comes, darkness disappears. Nagarjuna said, "You may have been in darkness for millions of lives. That does not matter. But I can give you a secret. You can light a candle in your being." And the thief said, "What about my possession? What about my profession? Have I to leave it?" And Nagarjuna said, what do you think he said? This is so cool. "That's for you to decide. I'm not concerned with you and your profession. I can only give you the secret of how to kindle a light within your own being. And then it's up to you." The thief said, "But whenever I have gone to any saints, they always say, 'First stop stealing, then you can be initiated.'" It is said that Nagarjuna laughed and said, "You must have gone to thieves, not saints. They know nothing. You just watch your breath." The ancient method of Buddha, just watch your breath, coming in and going out. Whenever you remember, watch your breath. Even when you go to steal, when you enter into somebody's house in the night, go on watching your breath. When you have opened the treasure and the diamonds are there, go on watching your breath. And do whatsoever you want to do, but don't forget watching your breath." The thief said, "This seems to be simple. No morality, no character needed, no other requirement." Nagarjuna said, "Absolutely none. Just watch your breath." And after 15 days, the thief was back, but he was a totally different man. He fell at the feet of Nagarjuna and he said, "You trapped me, and you trapped me so beautifully that I was not even able to suspect. I tried for these 15 days. It's impossible. If I watch my breath, I cannot steal. If I steal, I cannot watch my breath. Watching the breath, I become so silent, so alert, so aware, so conscious that even diamonds look like pebbles. You have created a difficulty for me, a dilemma. Now what am I supposed to do? Nagarjuna said, get lost. Whatsoever you want to do. If you want that silence, that peace, that bliss that arises in you when you watch your breath, then choose that. If you think all those diamonds and gold and silver is more valuable, then choose that. That's for you to choose. Who am I to interfere in your life? The man said, I cannot choose to be unconscious again. I've never known such moments. Accept me as one of your disciples. Initiate me. And Nagarjuna said, I've initiated you already. And that's the end of the story. And that's how this revulsion actually works. If we do the practice, we come up with a dilemma. We come up with a choice. But it's up to us what we choose. That's the point. It's not like, buying a hair shirt instead of buying a Rolls Royce. That won't help us. We will not progress in that way. But we can progress once we realize what the game is, that we have this propensity and habit to avoid loss and try to gain, and so forth and so on, and worry about what's happening in that way, rather than being present with all the qualities of kindness and compassion that naturally arise when we turn on the lights. So, anyway, that's my little talk on detachment, what to detach from, and revulsion, and what to be revolted by. I hope it was clear. There's, believe it or not, 7-8 minutes left for questions, if you have any. And the question mics are live and ready. Who is brave? Bethany is brave. I know, my feet do that too.
So I have a question. So Lama Kathy, in previous Dharma talks, has talked about aversion being kind of the same as attachment.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you differentiate between revulsion and aversion?
That's such a good thing. It's kind of like, how can you have devotion and at the same time detachment?
Okay.
It's like that. It's a little paradoxical. So the question we need to contemplate, I think, is what is it we're devoted to, or what is it we're attached to? What is it we take refuge in? What are we revolted by? What are our aversions? And so there's this thing for those of us who are on the path and not at the front door yet, called discriminating wisdom. And what we're trying to do along the way as we walk the path is to realize that our habits and propensities, our karmas, kind of have us hardwired to react to life, based on the stories we've told ourselves, the stories our parents have told ourselves about who we are and what we like and what we don't, and so on and so forth. And so when aversion comes up, it can come up in a number of ways. You can have aversion to suffering or harming, or you might have aversion to not getting your way, like maybe a holiday isn't celebrated the way that you think it must be. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, for instance. There are some vegetarians and even vegans around, they won't have a turkey. And there are probably people in their families that have great aversion to going to the vegan's house to have Thanksgiving dinner, because while there may be green bean casserole, I don't know, there won't be turkey, right? Well, so that aversion is just attachment to this Norman Rockwell image of Thanksgiving. But the holiday, the root of the holiday is beautiful. It's about cooperation between vastly different people and different cultures and how they help themselves through helped each other through a hard winter, right? And we lose in that kind of aversion and attachment, which are the same in that way, but we lose the whole meaning of it, the whole light of the thing, and it's just all darkness. However, if you're attached to commemorating this fundamental truth of interdependence, which is one of the nice things about Buddhism, is there are only two things to believe. One is that you have the same nature as the Buddha, and the other is that everything is interdependent, and therefore what you think, do, and say matters. So that's the point of discernment, or the discrimination. If your aversion is towards the obscuration of interdependence or somebody's own fundamental goodness, well, that actually is going to be a helpful step on the path. Now, how do I skillfully work with that? That's one thing. If your aversion is for having a Thanksgiving without a turkey, well, the cave might stay dark, So
Makes sense.
what we're discriminating is between really wholesomeness and unwholesomeness.
Okay.
What's really going on here? And we all have these reactions. There's a famous Zen teacher, Jim Dunn likes to tell this story, who was literally on his deathbed, and his attendant was there, and he said, Master, if there's one thing that you've learned in your long life and all of your literally surrendering this long life to the teachings of the Buddha, what's the one thing you learned? And he said, an appropriate response. And that's sort of it. Because while we're here in this human world of duality and so forth, while we may find a way to directly experience the non-dual truth, we still have subject-object all the time. We have senses, we have cognition, all that's going on all the time, as long as we're alive. So what's really key is our response. And so that's why one of the main Buddhas of the 5 Buddha families is the wisdom of Amitabha, as a matter of fact, is what's called discriminating wisdom. And that's what he's discriminating. So aversion and attachment are the same. When the discrimination is between whether it's a wholesome or an unwholesome motivation to that response that we're having. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
I don't know if I said that clearly or
Yeah,
not.
no, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, that was a very good question. And as Paul Volcker says, I tend to talk a lot. So let's take a moment and dedicate the merit of having been here together to hear and contemplate and practice the Dharma. So the dedication of merits on that page, let's read it in English together. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of Samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is. Samantrabhadra, who also knows in the same way. And all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all virtue. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you. And as we say in the old country, Lashana Tova, which means Happy New Year.